If everyone can just welcome Nick. So tell us, what's your origin story?
So, and before I get into that, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I take this stuff like very seriously. You know, I think it's really, really important, and I think that one of the things I admire most. So one of the parts that he didn't say is that he also coached me professionally for a while. So you were Brian P's coach for a while, doing business coaching, you know, accountability partners, goal setting, things that aren't necessarily, I mean, it's not stuff we haven't heard of, but I think there's always an impact when you meet regularly and you have a journal. So we would go through that for a while. I think we did that for like a year. Yeah. So he's been really, really important in my business, you know, and in the growth of it. I also think that it's really, really important to have people in your corner. So when he started this company, he reached out to me and said, hey, I want to start doing some educational stuff and I'd like to interview you. And that literally the second he said it to me, I was like, of course, because I know he would do the same thing for me. So I think in the interest of sort of qualifying this morning is, you know, if you could, you know that I'm not coming from a place of boastfulness, but you know, our company has like grown pretty substantially, which is really, really cool. We're really excited about it. Our team has grown from like 2 people, 3 people in 2019 to 11, and we now have 14 homes either in construction or in planning. And we also have a 22-unit townhome project that we just picked up. And so we're really, really excited. I mean, we had 2 homes in Huntington Beach in 2018. And so that's the trajectory we've had of late. And the reason why I bring that up to you is I hope, you know, some of the things I say, you can recognize that I take this business very, very seriously. I work really, really hard. Everybody around us works really hard. And at the end of the day, the underlying, I think, woven theme amongst the team, and I think we share this, is just that personality trait of like, we offer help to people. We try to be as valuable of a resource as possible for people, and we try to earn business because we're bringing value to somebody and we're receiving compensation to do so. You know, that's really what it's all rooted in. I think that's the reason why we're privately funded. I think that's the reason why, you know, individual investors have continued to, you know, receive proceeds from a project and then decide to push it into the next project, which has really kind of helped us remain consistent and sustainable. And I just, you know, I know you have that woven deep into your core, and I think that, you know, money, when put as a tool, is the best way to look at it. So a little bit of our backstory. So I think the long and the short, just to kind of catch you up to speed to where Revere got to now, is that I actually got out of school. So I got out of school and I went straight into the workforce, and I went into financial advising, and I was a financial advisor for 10 years. And what I did evolved into more of a planner. And what we were doing is we were doing estate planning, and I was getting estate attorneys involved and living trust attorneys. And what we would do is we would put together a retirement plan, and I was having conversations with individuals and with families around investing and insurance planning, and all of the investing conversations seemed to navigate eventually into Southern California real estate, and the stock market's one thing, but you know, so-and-so, my neighbor like flipped this home, and so I was having a lot of those conversations, and it's coupled with the fact that I also flipped my personal residence. When I was a little while ago, I had bought a home and decided, you know, because I bought it inexpensively relative to Southern California prices, is still a lot to me at the time. I think I put like almost nothing down into the FHA, and I mean, we can get into whatever you guys want to talk about, but I put as little down as possible, and then I personally on the weekend was fixing it up. I was doing masonry work on my own fireplace, and eventually after just a couple of years, I flipped it, and I was having that story brought up with clients, and so eventually what I started doing is I started what's called syndicating real estate deals, which means that I was putting investors together, I was putting money together, I was finding land, and I was doing what we call pro forma, which is where we basically say, okay, this is what it's going to cost us to buy it, this is what it's going to cost us to build it, and if we could sell it for this is what our spread would be, and then that spread, whatever capital was put into the project, so we can see how much return that would make. And once we started figuring that, we would find projects that we would take it down, I would raise the money, most of the time from existing clients that I had in finance, and I would bring them into real estate deals, And then a good friend of mine was the general contractor, and he would execute the general contracting work, and then we would kind of divide up accordingly and move on. After just a couple of those, I said, I would just love to just do this ourselves. And so we opened Revere in 2018, and it was the time in which we had a recent time of liquidity. We had finished a couple projects, cash had become available, and then I went and took those funds and we purchased additional, new properties on our own, and then we just not looked back. So that's a bit about, so we're privately funded in that literally we meet individuals and we have them invest in our real estate projects or lend us for real estate investment projects. What that looks like is if they put, say, $100,000 into a project, and let's say there's 1.2 in capital raise, we finance the rest. Again, I'm starting to figure out which directions we want to take the conversation, but we find, I find a lender, we get a construction loan, and we have some funds with investors, and then at the end of the project, we just split it all up. We finished a project in November of last year, our most recent sale. We've 2 homes in Hermosa Beach, and our investors got an annual 26% rate of return, which is pretty good. I think there's been projects that have done better. For the most part, we've done ground up new construction, but as you mentioned, there was a flip we did in Malibu. We had purchased it at a really, really good price. It was definitely
It was one of those stories.
It was one of those
right?
stories where hey, you could pick it up for
yeah.
50 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And so we bought it and then we just flipped it over.
Well, I think what's important to say, and I'm gonna back you up before we get
Please,
the good juicy stuff, right? Is when I coached Nick, it was at an interesting part in his career where I'm pushing him to raise capital because that was part of the big chunk at the time. Deal flow wasn't super kind of a hard thing for him, but then he's trying to expand with different partners, and then he's hiring, and he's getting his own GC license, and all these moving parts are happening at one time. And so I'd like to pull us back to the double lot and Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
Is one of the important things I always think, I heard someone say is, don't ask questions where someone is at, ask them where they were at, right? So for you, it's like, that mentality was before you became one of the, fastest growing companies in Orange County and all this stuff. So walk us through that part, because that was kind of the start of raising funds and doing a couple completions.
I mean, psychologically?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that I think it's innate. I think that there are some people, I've always been very competitive. So, I played sports in college, and I think part of it's it's just innate. I'm really competitive, and my father was in the military, so I was raised very strict. We were actually talking about that on the way over here. I think that those two things had a big impact on it. I think the other thing is when you focus on, the quote comes to mind to me, 80% of my results come from the top 20% of activities. Wouldn't be surprised if you taught me that. But the reason why I say that is because I really focus. It's a good thing and a bad thing. The negative is that it's just I take life sometimes a little too seriously, or I'm not present because I'm so fixated on what needs to be done. But I try to focus on that top 20 and have staff and team around me that you empower to help execute the rest. So I think it's been a team effort. I think I'm just, as an individual, just a very competitive person. And when it's all about, growing and expanding projects, it's really linear. It's if you have 2 projects and you go to 4 projects, well, you just dump, so I've been paying attention to that, and I've been finding satisfaction in the growth. And that satisfaction only further motivates me to want to do more. I think the next tier, if I was to sort of critique myself, the next tier would be to find ways to be happy and satisfied with what we currently have. Because there's this sort of polarizing effect that it has on me, in which it's helped us grow substantially because it's the way I think about it. The disadvantage, though, is I would want to find maturity in being happy with what we have rather than just always wanting more work, more projects, larger, because I think that's sort of I'll chase my tail. And so I think that would be the next tier of diving into it, but hopefully that kind of addresses a bit of the mindset. 2018, we started, we went from 2 projects, and then now 2023, we have a handful, and yeah, I guess that's like 5-6 years. Yeah.
I think to demystify it from a coaching perspective, which is not the point of the conversation, but what's I think interesting, because I know everyone's background here, when I see you, I'll meet you later, is that that like I don't see you different than you were in 2018. What I think is a quote that I love, which is, "It already happened, time just hasn't caught up yet," right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is still the same, grinding, running around, someone needs a check, you probably have someone to handle that stuff now, right?
Yeah.
We have the nail with the receipts, that's who used to do it for, paying people back, right?
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we went from, I think there's a couple of additional things.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's been a contributing factor is that I've been really, really mindful. So I come from finance, and as a financial advisor, literally every single day as I would give suggestion about saving money, about like, don't buy this vehicle, I don't know that you can afford. Like, I didn't get that like myopic with clients, but I generally had the theme of letting people know that they should save, and I think we've done that through the business. So we pick up new work and we receive new funds. I don't mean like from an investor, I mean we earn, and like I don't do anything with that except to grow the business. I would say probably like 80 to 90%.
Yeah.
I think that's been extremely helpful. We went from a trailer, so I rented a shipping container that they cut open a door and they cut open a window, and we had I think 4 projects at a time, and I found the closest one to my home, and I popped a trailer on the back of it, and that was where I worked out of, because it was like $300 a month. And we were able, the money we saved on the lease, we were able to then just continue to pump into the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're just doing that exact same thing, but just on maybe a little bit different scale.
Yeah.
But the concept's the same. I think those have also been important mindset. The other thing that I was gonna say is that I also spend, and I was thinking of this as you were chatting, I also spend the majority of my time making decisions that impact, this is gonna maybe sound a little like cornball, but I literally make decisions that are I see it through the lens of like 3-4 years from now, not right now. And I think that I do that a lot. And I think that that's been really, really helpful. And I think that when you have the mindset like that, so I have so let's say whatever the field you're in, let's say that there's something that takes you 3 hours to make. Whether it be a PowerPoint, a deck, a pitch deck, an offering, you whatever it is that you're making, you're presenting to somebody, like the first thing I would say is if it took you 3 hours, is that something you do regularly? Is that something that could be templated? Is there a way in which we could take this 3 hours, make it effective for the future and say, okay, great, like I've done this once, I'm probably gonna do 4 or 5 of these a year. Why don't I just, after this one's done, why don't I figure out a way to make that document templated, save it somewhere, and then the next time I have a situation where I need to do a 3 hour, it really only takes me 30 minutes because I have 80% of it done. Like those types of things have also been really helpful.
Yeah, so systems,
process,
yeah.
I mean, I talk about that all the time. Process, systems, strategies.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in that trailer right now, because what people don't know is like the outdoor bathroom was next to the front door.
Yeah, I use the porta potty.
The porta potty was like, you walk in, it's like the porta potty's right there, and it was like, the door had the rope on it.
And we were doing okay at that time. I mean, like honestly too, like that's something I'm proud of. We were doing fine at the time, but we didn't want to spend money on lease.
Yeah, but I think part of it was the lease thing, but it also was a time saver for you. Like you were out.
Oh, I was on the site.
Right?
That was a huge help.
You're there, and then the other person would come in and all that stuff. The one thing I do want to talk about is in that time frame, the modeling you had from the GC friend, because a lot of I think your evolution or anyone's evolution comes from some sort of close modeling, right? Like. We take it in our childhood from our parents, our grandparents, our friends' parents, right? Modeling's super, super important because during that time frame, then you started to open your eyes more about like wholesaling. Not to say you did that or did not do that, but I think the juices were there because you were exposed to someone doing it at a pretty high level.
Yeah, both professions that I've had, if I could define, let's say this is development and the previous is financial planning, in both I guess in both careers that I had a mentor that was further along. So in my last profession, when I was doing financial planning, I had a private office. It was like almost like a little franchise, and I had a business partner. We didn't share any business, but we shared overhead, we shared staff, we had a couple of staff, and he was like 7 years older than me. And he had a mortgage business, and it tanked in 2008. He had a mortgage lending business, and he was a young guy, and he had like, I don't know, 30 people. And it tanked, and then he started doing financial advising, and I linked up with him early on. He became a mentor to me. He was, like I said, 7 to my senior, and I just learned a lot from him. And then in this profession, the individual that was the general contractor that I first started having do the projects with me, he also is like an absolute machine. He and I grew up together. We're the same age. He's currently developing 365 single-family homes in Reno right now, and he's also doing a 184-unit apartment complex in Banning, California. Those are 2 of like, I think, 10 projects that he has going. He's an absolute monster. And so I just picked up from him. I picked up a lot of information from him.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions about any of that stuff? Lending side, mindset? Because as the story progresses.
So I got a question. How did you all got to start somewhere, right? So how did you pool your initial investors, and how did you go about the approach of which investors you were gonna go after? If it was 1, 2, 3, or 4, and obviously that initially that can spiderweb over time. But how did you initially approach that when you didn't have the experience?
Raising capital.
Yeah.
That's all.
No. Yeah. So, and I'm gonna give you the cool thing too is I give you like the full behind the scenes. There was like maybe 3 or 4 families that I had done retirement planning for a while, and I had one was a small business. It's really actually a unique story. They did like the ring stuff, but they did it well before that was common, in like the 90s and in the early 2000s, and before they wrapped up that business, I had like set up benefit plans for them. All their like 401k, I started all of it for them. So I'm looking at a client that has, and it's getting to why they were definitely one of them, is I had amassed a pre-tax retirement plan for their business that had amounted to like a few $100,000 that they didn't have prior to meeting me. So that was one thing. But what I did is I told there was 3 or 4 families, I said, listen, I don't have any experience, but you know me, you trust me, you know that I'm gonna work hard. And the general contractor, I pumped him up, said, hey, listen, these are all the stuff he's done. Like, he's involved, like in some way. I said, I asked for your trust once, and then I won't have to ask for it again. And those 3 or 4 families performed well. Every single dollar was accounted for. Every they had earned well, and then it branched from there. And then after a few years, the experience thing still comes up, or lack thereof. But at the same time, I think that I don't know how else to. They literally said, you know what? I'll just go with you. We believe in you, and I just had to find a few people that would do that.
Because they have to take that leap of faith.
They for sure. And it also helps that some of the outreach that I had for investing in real estate is because I was so familiar with their finances. I was specifically going to individuals or families that had more of a legacy play with some of their funds that they weren't necessarily living on. They weren't living on it. They weren't going to use it in 10 years. And I was addressing like, maybe we can use some of these funds that you're going to pass to your family anyways. Maybe we can earn with that. And that was easier because I wasn't like, listen, in 2 years, if we don't do well, you're not going to be able to eat. Like it was,
you have to sell the house,
Yeah, it was a little bit of a legacy play with those early investors.
Yeah. So how is that different than you raising capital today, or what's that look like?
The conversation then, and when I had answered your question, the conversation then was more so around just believe in me. And the conversation now is historical performance, and this is what we're gonna do. And a lot of times, I think there's been a little bit more awareness around, I'm actually producing deliverables to them before I even have them invest. So I'm putting the EMD down with company funds. I'm not asking for them to put an EMD down. I'm typically closing on the land acquisition with a bridge with our own funds. and then that becomes our skin in the game, and then the vast majority I do raise, but at that point in time, I've already said, hey, listen, we got the land, this is what we're thinking. I've also started architecture, give a few $1,000 to an architect to start doing some schematics. And then when I'm going to that investor, instead of asking them, hey, I just really need you to believe in me, I'm like, hey, listen, the last few years we've done this. This is the project we currently have. We already own it. We've used our own funds. We're looking to construct the project and go to the construction. So I'm also showing them, like, we've already done a bunch of the starting work.
You're committed.
And what's that?
You're committed.
We're committed, yeah. And we put it in ourselves, and because the vast majority, so we could go, and I don't know how much time we have, but there's a whole conversation that I have around lending and how we lend, the brokerage side of it, the design side of it, the construction side of it, the investor, the return side of it, the accounting or the tax side of it, the fact that each and every one is a single purpose LLC that we open and close at the beginning and end of the project. I mean, there's a lot of those conversations that we could have, but that's, yeah.
I'll say that for afterwards
Yeah.
if you have specific ones, but I think the difference is that from what I see is the conversation is, do you want to be a part of what's going on versus we need your help to get started, right? And that's a completely different power shift, which is the train's going, right? And either you want to be a part of this with a potential return with our pro forma, or in the beginning it's please believe in me, right?
I think in both scenarios, a skill set and your sales approach makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I think that I put a lot of time and attention toward growing in that over the last, since I started.
Well, you're a people person naturally.
The sales aspect of it, yeah.
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 I think that's all side of part. It's all side of part.
Yeah, it's good. Let's fast forward a little bit too. I think one of the important to wrap up 2018, 2019 of your journey to move into, you started to expand personnel, and then it went down, and then now you have how many people who work for you?
I mean, there's like 6, 7 in the office, and then there's 6, 7 in the field, like laborers, one in kind of each trade.
Yeah, because you got your first assistant.
Yeah.
For that
Yeah.
company, right? And then she left,
Yeah.
and then you had some other things happen,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, boom, you have all these people. So can you walk through the hiring journey? Because I think what's important is most people understand or don't understand is you go into a business, you grab what you can get at the beginning, and then your standards change and their standards change. And usually if the people don't grow together, then you have disruption, and then you as an owner get better standards, and then you hire more people, and now you have more of what you wanted to create in the beginning.
Well, for the first thing that came to my mind is that I actually compensate the staff. I compensate the core personnel more than I compensate myself, because it just stays in the business and we do other things with it. So that's like a huge thing.
Yeah.
I think compensating them really well is helpful. I think getting creative with the comp plan, and I think it could go in many different fields. Like project manager, you have 5-10% of the profit. And it may sound kind of small, or it may not, but letting them know, like, hey, listen, like that also, it's funny because it's a win-win. It ties into the budget, it ties into the timeline, and it gives them a sense of ownership, it gives them a sense of additional purpose when they're looking at design stuff. Because I want them to feel like, because we all are a team. That's huge. That's huge. So when we're increasing personnel, or we're having the conversation around that theme, I would encourage to, there's also, so Gary Vaynerchuk, I know I tangent a lot, I just kind of go off the cuff.
Okay. This is the
Gary
fun to do it.
Gary V says, when you have employees, you work for them. And that's kind of like, I keep going back to that over and over and over again. So Luca works with us, Omar works with us, they're both on the marketing side. Omar is like, 15 years younger than me?
I thought you were going to say 15.
No.
Yeah, you look 15, but
So
that's
so
good.
so, so at first I'm like Omar, because what I wanted to say is at first I'm like Omar, like, so we started doing this live thing on every Friday, and I said, it'd be really helpful if you kind of like put together what you think we should talk about, and then even if it's just bullets. So Omar's like, here's what you're gonna say. Like, he's kind of telling me what I'm gonna do. Like, he absolutely is
You
like,
can't-
okay.
If you're on the camera, you can't see, but he's dead serious back there.
And then he's like, and then Omar goes, okay, here's what I want you to do next. And I go, okay, you got it. Like, that's not my lane, that's his lane,
Yeah.
you know, and he runs it. And
So
I think
ownership over there.
ownership over it, yeah, executive authority, you know, some of the things we've rolled out have been his suggestion or idea. Great, let's do it, you know. The only thing I ask is that if we do it, we either measure it, we analyze it after the fact, or if we decide we want to do it, we should do it for a consistent period of time. Those are my only requests.
That's great. So walk me through the previous people, because I think you were like that in the beginning, to now the people you have now. What's the biggest difference you think? Was talent? Was it the people? Was it the mission? Was it, because I don't think you've changed much, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think the way I'd answer that is the 6-7 people that work in the office, every single one of them I know personally before professionally. Omar and I met at the gym. Omar and I are at the gym, him today, not me. We're at the gym together pretty much every day at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And
We met in the sauna.
we met in the sauna. Luca
0% surprised.
Luca
You're
was
probably relaxing, and Nick's like, hey, what do you do?
yeah, Luca was my roommate years ago.
Oh, great.
And some of the guys like met me in Huntington. Every single person. Okay, to your question, I think that the synergy that we have is the way that I want to describe that. We all know each other well outside of work. Omar and our project manager in Huntington also surfed this morning together. So I think that it has a big. It has a big.
If people don't know, there's a surfing component to.
Yeah, there's
the
so we
business
all
and
kind
you.
of yeah. I mean, Omar's kind of, but as far as the synergy, okay, where it was, what it's like now. Where it was it was a little bit more like round hole, whatever the peg was. We just needed to like get business done, and I couldn't do it all. So I'm like, I just need people around me. Now it's a little bit. It was always intended to be intentional, but I think it's even more intentional now, in that the personnel we're also friends. So like we did a Christmas dinner. We went to, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Orange Hill on like the hillside. We went to a dinner together. We did an escape room together at Christmas, and like, so I think that also has a big component of, you know, that coupled with how the comp plan is structured to where they have a sense of ownership, and like I continue to try to empower them. Because at the end of the day, to be honest, it's like, it's gonna produce more for the company anyways. I mean, why not?
Yeah. People will go the distance for
Yeah.
you.
I've been offered selling some of the business to one of the staff members.
Yeah.
Like, to own some of this, like, let's go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, I'm a big fan of definitions. Are everything. They solve everything. If you know how to define something, then you know the rules around it, right? It could be just a friendship between a girl or a guy or whatever it is. If you understand what it looks like, you can then perform on that thing. And I think for you, your definition in the beginning when I first met him was, I don't care how much the company makes, I just want a really, really big company and a bunch of employees, right? And I forget the number now, but it was like hundreds or something like that. And I think that allowed you to make decisions based on, again, that future concept, which was going to lead me back to, in the position you are now, in that 5-year window, you discussed that one of your challenges would be more and more and more. So how do you create stops for yourself, or maybe you haven't yet?
I haven't yet.
How do you want
I mean, that's
to
the
do that?
truth.
Yeah.
So I haven't yet, and I definitely need to. I've been very aware of it. I think it's like, you know, it's important to at least be aware of it. If you're not ready to do something about it, like figure out at least that exists, and then what you can do about it. And I think that, I mean, I don't even know if I can give you an honest, like, what I would do. I have not even gotten to that. We just want to grow, and I just think that at some point to just be, I think specific goals would help address that.
So let me rephrase.
And then if we hit that goal, be happy about it and not necessarily feel like we have to do more.
How do you know if you've arrived or not?
I mean, technically, we all arrived already, right? Like, that's where you go from, like, the hippie stand. Like, we live in Southern California. We're all doing, we're all in good shape. I think we all have all of our limbs. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you really boil it down, like, we're all like that right now.
Okay. So then let's put Nick back into business mode.
Okay.
How do you know you've arrived in business mode?
The only way, the way that what comes to mind is analytics. So how I've arrived, my first go-to would be like, is there a percentage growth that we've had? What is that? So same thing with like Instagram. I'm gonna speak to this for a second. On Instagram, there's a lot of different people. Some people have like yellow or blue check marks, and like how you've made it for me is we go to the professional insights, and if our insights suggest that like followers, engagement, whatever those icons are, that it's like it has a 20% positive sign next to it. That's just, as long as we're growing, that's what I attribute it to. And I feel like we've made it if we continue. I mean, made it, it's like, kind of sounds like you're already there. But I feel like we're doing a great job, if I'll use that expression in lieu of made it.
Yeah.
We're doing a good job if our analytics suggest that we're on a positive growth. It's kind of just simple as that.
Great. You don't have any questions, I'm gonna pull it back, I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'm gonna fast forward to where we are today. So we understand the origin story and kind of what those first couple of years are like. Now we'll say we've arrived to today, right? And now your business is full steam ahead, you have great staff, you have lots of projects. What does your world look like on a daily scheme now? Like, what is the agenda of each week and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I have weekly reviews with each of the project managers on the projects that they're working on. I have once a week executive meeting where we're talking about big picture company stuff. We do a once a week marketing huddle where at the end of the week we talk about the stuff that we're going to do next week and the type of filming and content that we want to do around that so that we can showcase kind of what we're doing. A meeting with investors, meeting with lenders, looking at deals with brokers, and that's day-to-day emails, and that's pretty much it. I actually don't go to the sites anywhere near what I used to.
You don't live on the site anymore?
I used to live on the site.
Yeah, I think it's important because it's all about where you're on your journey, and I think the one thing I'll ask from you guys in the room today is ask from your perspective of where you're at, right? We have lenders, we have developers, we have Airbnb arbitrage, we have flippers, we have a lot of people in the room right now, and so there's a lot of places that you might want to ask for context of where you're at, or even reassurance, right? And so let's talk about, are we focusing Orange County? Is it more LA? What does that look
On that 22 units on the project. So I would feel like we were successful at the end of the year if the following happens. The existing projects that we have are pretty much run almost exclusively by the project manager that's on each one of those projects. So our existing portfolio is executed with very little of my involvement. That the 22-unit townhome project gets underway, and that also from an internal perspective, that our process is focused around scale.
Question for you, and I was thinking about how to frame it. So obviously, very big into community, you work and play with your friends and whatnot. And when you're in that growth mode and everybody's in trying to grow their business or grow their facet of it or stay in their lane. And this is where I'm having a challenge in my part is how do you, if you've hit a stop point where, hey, they're not coming out to surf anymore, or they're not, they're distracted on other things, how do you keep the team with their head in the game?
Yeah.
And how do you inspire them to call them out in a constructive manner where they don't get defensive?
The last part of what you just said, I think is by far the biggest. How would somebody go into a situation and explain, hey, listen, like I like you, we're friends, but you kind of need to step your game up a little bit? That's the hardest piece right there. Mm-hmm. I think that.
And have you had that discussion?
I have.
I
have. I think that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things that come to mind. If I can process it for a second, I think.
I feel like I can speak.
Yeah, go. No, do it.
Like, I think what he does best, honestly, is like seeing how hard that he works, at least from my perspective, just inspires me to be like sometimes I don't want to leave until I see him leave. Like, I don't want to leave the office until he does.
Because it's
I'm just
accountability.
yeah, exactly. And I think by giving us that freedom to really own our roles and what it is we're in charge of, it's like it makes you feel more responsible for it and like, oh, I have to, or I want to achieve more and I want to work harder for the company, because it's like I see how hard he works and I see how much freedom and flexibility he gives me. It's like you just want to pay it back. That's what I'd say.
That's great. And the other thing that came to mind to me is that I think the first thought that came to my mind is that I sort of already assume that whatever they're compensated right now is not changing. Take it through the lens of like, okay, then cool. Like, and not to be passive aggressive, but like only to explain and be like, cool, then you're good with what you're doing right now and what you're making. That's cool.
Well, it's
I guess just kind of like almost in order to expand, like you're gonna have to do more. And I think I wait until those conversations come up about either increase in wage or adding on another project under their watch. It's like if they're not doing as good of a job, I kind of let that happen, and I just like, okay, then there's no growth yet for you.
Yeah, I'm in the same way, and so like when I hear, and Corinne can attest this, I hate the saying "squeaky wheel gets the oil." Like I can't stand it, because if there's a squeaky wheel, then I need a new wheel, right? Like if talent comes in and does stuff, then you get more things, right? You ask for stuff, you want more autonomy, you want more responsibility, you want a title change. You can have, I think with you, what I've noticed is you can have anything inside of your world as long as you work for it, right? If not, then it's okay. I can't focus on someone who doesn't want to be coached up, right? I gotta focus on the people that are giving me 110%.
And to piggyback off that, and it goes back to your question, one of the other things that I've witnessed is when new people come in, it actually makes the ones that are already there work better, work harder, because the newer hires are a little bit like higher tier, because we're viewed more valuable, so it would attract a better talent. So when somebody new comes in, like Ryan, for example, like there's a new project manager that works with us, and he's making the ones that are already here like better, because they're like, okay, like
Yeah, it's a process. It's called storming, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it creates disruption inside of an organization, which allows the other people to receive it as good or bad, right? And so either people rise, or you're going to see those squeaky wheels come out.
you kind of hire better talent, and then indirectly show them that you need to, like, this is our new bar.
Yeah. So coach up or
Does that help?
coach out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your question, Patrick.
So you do a lot of business, friends and family offices and, maybe non-employee type business partners. How do you deal with somebody that you had maybe a potential perception and understanding of them in one way, but then when push came to shove, you found out that their mindset was a different way and it's maybe no longer a conducive relationship?
I'm literally experiencing that right now with one of our investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did really, really well for him the last couple of years, and we've offered him a lot, and he's taken more, and is becoming really like not conducive toward a good working relationship, because it reminds me of like sometimes the best deals are when you don't get. That client is going to lose us either money or energy, and just a time suck.
Yeah.
And I actually sent him an email this morning, and this isn't like, I was like, I honestly don't think we should keep the property. Like, I think we should just sell it with the plans and move on. And I was gonna build that out.
Yeah.
And actually most people, even in our organization, don't even know that yet.
Yeah.
This is like literally in the last like 48 hours.
I can relate, yeah.
And so it's like, so to your question, I think it's helpful to continue to be as clear as you possibly can when you have the undertone that the money is not the driving factor, that the collective opportunity cost
Yeah.
of wasting time, energy, effort, and funds into something that is not reciprocated, like that, me and the investor don't see eye to eye.
Mhm.
And they genuinely don't think it has anything to do with me.
Mhm.
It's just, I mean, it's bias.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
Coming
like,
from
I
you,
mean,
yeah.
we came into that one Malibu project. It's like, dude, it made a 370% annualized return.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Amazing.
And then we rented out this new place. Like we just got this is the project that we're looking to sell. I gave him the entire rent because we rented it out for 6 months. Because he brought most of the money. I think we brought 10%, he brought 90%. Like, you know what? I don't need 10% of the rent. I don't need like $800. I'm not speaking like I couldn't benefit from that, but it didn't make a lot of sense. I thought it would be more advantageous to show him, like, you know what? Just take all the rent, and once we get into construction, then like you don't need to do that. Just take it. And then even yet still thinking that would kind of add dividends into something I could cash out on later, whether it be a good working relationship communication wise. Didn't happen. He just immediately, now he's asking for more. And I was like, nah, I think we should just sell the project.
Yeah, you gotta realize the opportunity when to just cut your losses and.
Right, and to cut our losses in the short term on a P&L is gonna be worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because it was a good, I mean, it's a 6,000 square foot house, we're probably not gonna build out.
Well, I think the thing too to understand is like knowing both of you, right? And we're not exactly where the origin of the question comes from, but there's stages in your career or when you're building something when you can and cannot do what you're talking about, right? And I think context is important, which is
You're absolutely right.
2018.
No.
I know Nick is like just, oh my God, this person's like hammering me and and I'm gonna get through it.
You
and I
eat
think,
it, 'cause
and I
you have
think
to.
that's the important thing to realize is when does that wave crest over, right? Where now 5 years later you can say, you know what?
Yeah.
It's gonna suck today, but man, it's gonna suck way worse in the future.
Right.
And I think that's always a perspective you should have about your business is where are you in that journey of when can I say, screw you, right?
If I was to play devil's advocate, so the majority of the time you gave that explanation, I agreed with you. And at the very end, I sort of might suggest posing an alternative. And that alternative would be, I think that with all things constant, I think that you could always be in a position to turn on that business. And I think that if you're not, you're either not living underneath your means, or you haven't put enough emphasis in creating a pipeline, so that you're sort of like, you kind of have to take this, right? So open up your pipeline.
More judicious than they've ever been, right?
Of course.
And they're reading the same papers that everyone else is reading, so they want more. You said something earlier about this is what we're doing, right? So what you said in 2018, this is what we're doing, is gonna be, I'm guessing, a different topic than this is what we're doing today in 2023.
It is.
In terms of getting investors interested and engaged. And
Right.
so what are you doing today? Obviously, the 22 unit is a
Yeah.
big bandwidth
Yeah.
piece, but
I'm
on a go forward basis, what do you?
So I'm
how would you-
tracking what you're saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely, to reiterate, in 2018, when I was asking them to invest,
Yeah.
it was a different climate. I mean, looking back, we were still in an expansion phase, right?
Right.
And we're no longer really there. We're also
Right.
I mean, everybody knows, right? Interest
Right.
rates are high, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So the conversation has shifted there. However, the parts that I'm using now that do still connect to 18 is I say, for example, we have a 2-home project in Huntington. We have several we've done in Huntington. So what I tell them is, so understand, first of all, let me speak to that climate adjustment. I go back to the fundamentals and I say, GDP is still, nominal GDP is still phenomenal. Real GDP, as it's, taken out for inflation,
Yeah.
doesn't reflect as well, but our nominal GDP is still very, very strong. I still think that there's a ton of fundamentals that are intact. I think that, unemployment is below 3% in Orange County. I think that there's a large array of jobs that are being created. I mean, there's a lot of factual data to suggest that a lot of it is an emotional discomfort rather than a suggestion in a shift in the market based off of facts. So I think that as soon as I can get them to buy into that philosophy, I have them halfway there. Then the other half is, in 2018, this kind of goes more to your question, although the climate's different, I'll say, hey, listen, I've built this exact home before. Now, granted, the subcontractor is going to charge a little bit more, but if we increase based off the cost of living type of multiplier, we have a pretty good idea of what the budget is. That's the biggest, there's two big assumptions when you're going through a pro forma. What are we going to exit the project at? And what is it going to cost us to construct?
Right.
And the timeline, let's say 3. All 3 of those specifically connect to previous projects. So when I tell them that one of the biggest assumptions, timeline, has nothing to do with money or what the market's doing, has everything to do with our previous experience building out that exact product type. So I tell them that I have a lot more confidence, and I have a lot more confidence in the timeline because they've done it before. I have a lot more confidence in the budget because I've done it before, and I have a lot more confidence in the exit because we've done it before, and because since 2018 we have 3, 4, 5 new, sub-market experts that we're in contact with on a regular basis that we weren't in 2018.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And then they're like, okay, listen, I get the market's always going to be somewhat of an unknown. But if I look at the pro forma and I could check off this is more specific, the timeline's more specific because of historical performance, because we know how long it's going to take us. The budget we know a lot better, and the exits we know a lot better. And they're like, okay, yeah, granted the market's not doing as well. What's the worst case scenario? And then now, as opposed to 2018, because in 18 I think I was a little naive and overly optimistic, is I have the conversation about if the property doesn't sell for what it should sell, what we're assuming it would, this is how we would execute a strategy B. An option B, which I wasn't having conversations in 18. I was basically we're gonna do so well, right? And
I think that's prudent today, right?
And so now I'm like, hey, listen. Now I walk them through the path. I don't even wait for them to bring it up. I proactively engage in walking them down that alternative path to help make them more comfortable in the investment. And say, hey, listen. By the way, because of our experience with these lenders, this is the size of the project. This is how much our debt service is going to be at the end of the project. We do non-Dutch loans, so we're not really paying interest on the whole amount until we draw it out. At the end of the project, this is how much we're going to be paying in debt service. This is how much we could rent the residence for. And so having that conversation of worst case scenarios, we rent it out and we kind of just break even, or maybe we're a little bit in the red, and then I refinance and restructure some long-term financing, which I also didn't really. I was sort of playing possum at 18. Now I'm I actually go through that path of, if we were to recapitalize and refinance the residence, it's just a little bit more of financial bandwidth that I wasn't very privy to back then because I didn't have to walk through that. After having a few of those clients bring it up to me, what do you do if the house doesn't sell? I'm like, okay, well, and then now I have a story for that I didn't used to have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe just what was your biggest glass ceiling that you felt like you hit? And what did you do to break through that to get to where you are today?
That's a hell of a question. That is a really good question. I think so there's a couple of things. A couple of things came to mind. First one is raising money is obviously a huge glass ceiling. Still a really big glass ceiling for us. And I think that one of the approaches I've taken toward addressing that is just continue to show my humanity and raising money and be like, listen, you don't necessarily have to come into this. I'll tell you why I suggest it. And then just having the pipeline be large enough where I'm having enough contacts to where I don't have to put any pressure or emphasis. I can let them go on their own. And I've found doing it that way, they actually come around a lot faster because when they come to the table, they're realizing that they're making that decision rather than I persuaded them to make the decision. So that's been helpful. The other glass ceiling was the construction side. So one of the things I didn't emphasize was that me and my dad used to, on the weekends, do carpentry work at the house when I was growing up as a chore and, teaching me how to be a hard worker. But I really didn't have any thorough construction experience at all. And so that was also a very big glass ceiling. So I had given myself 1 or 2 projects where I literally was on site all day, every day, all day. I put a portable plastic table in the living room and sat there on the site all day. And that would work. If I was on a computer, I was on the site. And that was helpful to be able to break the glass ceiling of having construction experience. I think you can only, at least it's been my experience, that until I felt confident in construction, we were never going to be able to go very far. And so a couple years I just sort of allocated toward Like, this is me in, grad school. Like, I just was on site every day. Like, my goal for the next 2 years is like learn the construction. That was a huge one. And then even now, like I said, the capital raise, it's still very much a glass ceiling. And aside from the perspective I take when I have these conversations with them, I'm starting to, I think the ways in which we're starting to address that is we have more of a marketing presence than we ever had, which I think is a long tail approach toward helping raise money. I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon. But I think that we'll be glad we did in a number of years. We're using advertising dollars. We're sponsoring events. So like the Corona Del Mar home tour.
Yeah.
And thank you guys all for coming. It really meant a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm Steve. How you doing?
Nice to meet you.